phases that we're going to go through, all of us collectively in this disaster. The role of your local government. So if you're an elected official on the line, you'll appreciate this part, as well as if you're an economic development professional, what your role is. I'm also going to look at some of the resources that we offer with our organization, and then turn it over. Michelle Evans has agreed graciously to talk to us about what the government of Alberta is doing. And Justin Reamer has come on the line to talk about what the government of Canada is doing right now in this area. So then we'll have it open for some Q&A. So as far as background, like the post-disaster challenges, that's what I want to talk about first, because most individuals, businesses, and communities are going to find themselves in really uncharted waters. I see some people on the line from High River and from Fort McMurray, and you know that what's going to happen is something you probably did not plan for. And it's going to be difficult, and this one in particular is going to be difficult. So I want to talk about just some of the common challenges that every disaster brings, and you can hopefully use this information as things start to unveil over the next few days and weeks and months. You'll have this in the back of your head and you'll go, well, this is common. This is something that happens and I shouldn't be scared of it as long as I know it's coming and have a plan to deal with it. One of the ones that's often shows us, one of the first challenges is vulnerabilities you never knew you had. And this is really common because, you know, it takes a disaster sometimes to really point out vulnerabilities. We might think we're prepared and know it'll never happen, and then something does happen and you go, oh shoot, didn't plan for that. And so in this particular case, when we're talking about this pandemic, you know, we're going to see some significant challenges to our health systems. We're going to have to, you know, we're already seeing it, protecting our health workers. What's going to happen if we need a mass surge capacity? If all the hospitals are overwhelmed? How are we going to have enough ventilators, masks, protective gear? All of those issues are going to be something our health services, hospitals have to face. For businesses and even for municipalities, for anyone doing business that relies on a certain type of product or service through their supply chain, there's going to be challenges there. We're seeing, I don't know, I'm in Calgary and I already see there's a lot of stuff in our stores that's missing. As a business, if I rely on certain products and services to do my business and I can't access them, I hope I have plan B, because the supply chain challenges are going to be significant. So that's something to think about, no matter what kind of capacity you're in. School closures, once again, we've seen it in Calgary this week. All of our kids are off school. Some are not even going back till September. So that adds significant additional challenges to parents who are trying to work, who are, you know, don't have daycare and can't afford to have additional childcare. And so it's all these little things that start to add up, and things that you thought, oh, well, I relied on that previously, and all of a sudden it's not there. This is when I'm out teaching communities about if someone could mute, just make sure you're muted when you're on. There's going to be overwhelming communication challenges. This is number one. We see it all the time, and this could mean there's a technological failure, and that often happens when, say it's a hurricane or tornado, that kind of stuff, when your utility network is down, your internet is down, those kinds of challenges. But you know, there's also message failures. I mean, we've already seen it. There's rumors on the internet. People are saying, well, I heard this, well, I heard this, and it's all conflicting information. And trying to call through all of that is important. And in your role to your key stakeholders, it's important that they understand that the information you're giving them is credible and it's accurate and it's timely, because they're going to get it wherever they can find it right now. So you might as well be that trusted source for your stakeholders. Right now, we know many communities, you know, a lot of people are working out of their homes, and I assume a lot of you are in that situation. And so, you know, how is this going to affect your local businesses that are trying to communicate? They've got a remote workforce. Some of us are used to working remotely, and others have never done it in our lives. Lisa Slade on the, or Sweet on the line. And I know in the case of Fort McMurray, when the fires happened, they were everywhere. They were in Edmonton, they were in Vancouver and Toronto and Calgary. And really, when you're not used to working with people remotely, it's really challenging. It's challenging when you work with them next to you, let alone when they're around.
You can come in.
People are going to be increasingly.
It's a seminar, Luca, come in.
Kent, can you please mute yourself?
Mute?
Yeah.
Sure.
And so the other thing is people are going to be isolated. I know that people already are feeling that way. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have our weekly webinars, so our members know you're not alone, and that you can connect with each other, and things you're going through, you can find solutions collectively together. If you're an elected official, the big thing I always want you to remember is you have two audiences. Please don't forget that. Oftentimes you're communicating to your residents, but you're not communicating to your businesses. So please, if you're having any kind of media conferences, talk to your businesses. Let them know they matter, because I see over and over again when crises like these happen, they get lost in the shuffle, and if you don't communicate to them, they're going to shut down. The other thing that communities are going to struggle with, and businesses as well, is what's the impact? You're going to be asked right away, what's the impact on the economy? What's the impact on your business? Well, if you don't have data right now, and like on where you are, it's going to be very difficult to prove the impact. So understanding what's happening is really important. For a community, what was your economy before the disaster? Where were you at? Was it already on the down before this happened? And then this just made it even more complex. And then at the end of the day, you're gonna have to understand, so where are you going? Where's the next step? How are you gonna move forward? But this is often really tough for people to do. The other thing, and this is one, I know this focus is on business and economic, the angle, but mental health, I cannot stress enough. I know that, I think Angela's on the phone from High River, and I know that after High River, this was a significant issue for their municipality, for their workers, but it's also something very raw for businesses. You can't go through a disaster and come out the same the other side. It's impossible. I don't know anyone who has. So be very mindful. If you have workers, even your families as individuals, be very cognizant of this for your own perspective, because this is something that often goes unaddressed, but it's there, and these trigger events will bring it back. And so if you have employees, you have people on your team, just reach out to them and make sure that they're okay. This is another one, and that's why I wanted to invite Justin and Michelle on the phone, because this is really hard to do even when there's no disaster. So from a person from the outside going, what can I access? What does government have? It's often very complicated. And so knowing what you have, reaching out to your local officials, reaching out to your province, your federal government, to understand what programs, what services do you have? Do they apply to me? Do they apply to my business? Do they apply to my community? All of those questions, you want to get answered now. And they try to make this available to you, but it is difficult. There's a very noisy internet, and to really find out what's there is hard. And so that's, we'll hear from Michelle and Justin shortly on what they're trying to do. And I know even they're trying to figure out all the various things that they want to do to support, because this is a new scenario to them as well. This is the biggest challenge for me, from my perspective. No one looking after businesses, and retaining them and supporting them before they fail is critical. We know from the statistics, 1 in 4 won't reopen, and I've heard that often that's higher. And so that to me is a very, that's a scary statistic, and I don't know what the statistic's going to be after this pandemic, but that to me says, if you are in the business, well, first of all, if you're in business, I want to make sure that you know that people care about your business and we want to support you. If you're an economic developer, I want to challenge you to figure out quickly how you're going to support these businesses, because you know that bringing a business to your community is a lot of work and it doesn't happen that often. You need to protect what you have and make sure that they stay open and that they stay in your community. I'm just going to shift a bit to this chart here, because it kind of, for those of you who might not be familiar with the emergency management continuum, this is how disasters, the 4 phases of what happens. So you've got that prevention mitigation piece, the preparedness piece, but what I want to focus on in this webinar is the response and recovery piece, because we're in response right now, and hopefully in the near future we'll get into recovery. I just don't know. You'll see what I mean when I say I don't know when that's going to start happening. When you look at response, these are the 4 priorities that emergency responders have. And it's really that first piece is they're saving lives. And I totally get that. We need to save lives and we need to minimize impact on people. Number 1 priority every time. And then they look at protecting property. And one of the things I want to just give a heads up to any one of you who have a business and are not physically in your business, looting does become an issue. And, you know, not to scare you, but to really think about if you have a potential of looting your business, like someone looting your business, like think now of how you're going to protect that business, because a lot of people will know, you know, hey, nobody's allowed to be out. Well, somebody's going to sneak out and somebody's going to, you know, look for things, easy things to steal and to destroy. So just think about that. But that is something that you have to protect. The other thing they do is protect the environment. And obviously, when you think of a natural disaster, that's pretty evident of what that means. But there is that last bullet. And that's one I think is often overlooked. And it's protect the economy. And there are decisions that are made right now in those emergency operations centers everywhere we live that can either have a positive or a negative effect on your business community. So be aware of that and make sure you're giving voice to businesses and what they need. Government doesn't know what they don't know what you're hearing. You're hearing from the front lines. Make sure you communicate that because you're going to be the closest voice to that business community and what they need. This is that 4th phase, the recovery piece. This is actually a FEMA from the federal government in the US. But I love this chart just because it shows what recovery is like. When you think about response, it's very hierarchical. You have one person in charge in your EOC and everybody else knows what they're supposed to do. And it's a military operation, it's very calculated. This is what happens after. When everybody leaves, this chaos happens. And I'm just giving it as a warning because we've seen it over and over and over again because nobody is in charge of recovery. That's the challenge. You've got the economic piece, the housing piece, infrastructure, you've got all these various pieces, but nobody tends to take the mantle and make sure that this is done well. And there's also very little money for this phase. So, you know, one of the things we're trying to increase is the awareness around when a disaster happens, don't just give to the response, give to the recovery and the mitigation and the preparedness, because that's going to pay off in the long run. We know that every dollar you put into mitigation saves, I've heard, anywhere from $6 to $15 on recovery. So that's a pretty significant return on investment. But this slide is meant to show when the disaster happens, you don't wait to start your long-term planning. It starts now. You've got to start thinking about what you're doing in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And so, and there's no finite date. You don't know that in 1 month's time, intermediate starts. In 3 months, your long-term starts. It's impossible. There are people, I know communities where disasters happened in 2013. They're not fully recovered. 2017, not fully recovered. So just know that it's going to be a fluid process and you think you're getting ahead and then you realize, oh, darn it, we're not quite there. It's going to we're in it for the long haul. And so it's that much more important that we work together, that we connect with our community stakeholders quickly, and that we all get on the same page and pool our resources, because they're finite, and together we're going to be able to achieve something faster and accelerate our recovery. If you're an elected official, and I know we have some mayors and councillors on the line, this is my challenge to you, in addition to communicating to your business community. But you need to ensure, if you've got an economic development arm, an organization, a department, make sure and give them the ability to respond. They need the resources to respond. You're going to be really focused on building back better. You're going to have to be thinking about things like, what's your community going to be like after the crisis ends? When everybody gets back in their homes and their businesses, they need help. I mean, where's your shared vision? Try and reach out now. How are you going to move forward? The other piece of advice I give you is get in charge of your recovery now. Don't wait. Don't assume someone's going to do it for you. Of course, other levels of government are going to be there to help you and share resources and support you, but you have to make the decisions. You got to set the vision. You got to get that momentum going. And also, I encourage you, enable your economic development people, your chambers. Let them know that business retention is going to be your #1 priority. Keeping those businesses and helping them stabilize and then grow their market back, that has to be high on your priority list. If you're an economic developer in that role, this is my message to you. These are the roles you're going to have to play, whether you like it or not. So I encourage you to suck it up today and look at these roles, because you're going to be inspiring your business community. You're going to help spearhead that economic recovery. You're going to manage projects. You're going to be advocates for them. You're going to take some calls that are kind of hard. And when you live in the community, I mean, I think back to Fort McMurray, and we had people in our hotline from Fort McMurray taking calls, and it was tough because they know those people. They live next to people. These are your friends. So, you know, make sure you know that there's a role for you to play. And part of our role is equipping you with the tools and resources that you're going to need to help them, and to be compassionate for where they're at, and to really support them, because they will remember. If you reach out now and support them, they will remember you long after the disaster is over. I get choked up when I talk about that. Post-disaster. So here's some things. I want to give you some actual things you can be thinking about in your roles right now. And I mentioned it earlier. To me, your business retention and expansion program is #1, hands down, the most important program you are going to do. Business visitations, getting out there when you can, but right now you can be calling them. You can be saying, how are you doing? How are your employees? Where are you at? Can I help you? What resources are you looking for? In the case of, I go back to Fort McMurray, we created a business hotline right away where people, we had them call in. We did a survey with them. We found out every single day, what are your biggest needs? And then programs can be developed to meet the needs, instead of a program being developed and then figuring out, does it meet the need? So this is really good, a way to reach out. We also, you know, I also encourage establishing some type of physical recovery center when you can. Right now, you can do a virtual one. Get together all the resources from your community that can help your businesses. Don't make them have to search around. They can't. Just make it easy for them. If you want a web portal on your community website, the button, if you're a business, click here, make it easy and give them what they need. Make it interactive. If you don't have an up-to-date business database, that is really unfortunate, because that's your kind of calling list. But if you don't have one, well, then make one starting now, and start making those connections to people and saying, okay, where are you at? What can I do? Is there anything you need? The other thing, you will have more complicated cases. Some will be easy, they'll just be in and out. Others, they're going to be tough, and you need to figure out how you're going to manage those cases. Is there a person within your organization that can really spend the time and talk them through it, and let them know that you're there and that someone cares? So, I mean, that's something to really think about. And doing, when you can, obviously in-person types of sessions, but there's nothing stopping you right now from organizing a webinar for your business community and saying, hey, here's a session on something, whatever you want to make it on, what we as a municipality have for you, how we're going to communicate. Register with us today so we can communicate the most up-to-date information. So getting all that stuff out is really important as well. This is something that when we were doing our surveys with various communities post-disaster, this continues to come up as one of the pressing issues for small businesses. And it's probably no surprise to anyone. But I'm talking small businesses. I mean, the majority of businesses in Canada are considered small. It's not the big corporations that have big infrastructure in place that can support this type of thing. I'm talking about small businesses that don't have much cash flow. I presented to some accountants and I asked them, what do you recommend for cash flow for that kind of rainy day fund? And they said, well, to be realistic, we see most, they're lucky if they have 2 to 3 months. And I'm like, what? Because I thought it was about 6 months. She said, 2 to 3 months if they're lucky. So know that some of your businesses were probably hanging on by a thread before, and this is not going to help them. So they're going to do anything they can to stay alive. And so they're going to need access to some financial tools. I mentioned earlier that 1 in 4 will not reopen after a disaster. And, you know, some of them are going to be underinsured. Some won't have insurance. That's what we found. They're going to have limited workforce options. Their workers, maybe they can't even pay their workers. They're going to have diminished customers. Where's their customers coming from? They may have no customers for a few weeks or months. And if you have no cash flow, it's going to be very difficult, because sometimes your expenses, your fixed costs don't change. You're still paying rent. You're still paying all of these costs, and yet you're having no income, no revenue. Okay. Here's a few. Why am I this far ahead already? I need to go back, sorry. It's not letting me go back here. Just 1 sec. Here are a few ideas around financial options. And I am, as those of you who have heard me talk before, I'm not a big fan of loans, and I'll talk about loans, but I am a huge fan of grants. And only because when people are on the edge, when businesses have very little options, giving them more debt is maybe not the greatest thing as plan A. And we know from the communities we've worked in and the businesses we talk to that and I have someone who worked on the front lines and has PTSD to this day because she recommended to some businesses to take on some loans. And they actually went out of business shortly thereafter. And the thing with the loan is they're repayable. At some point, you got to pay them back. And I mean, you know, it might work for some businesses, and I'm not saying that shouldn't be on the table, but if there's a way to look at grants somehow, that's, to me, a really good option for businesses. In the US, we see a lot of these loan programs. You see a bridge loan where they take, you know, just gets you over that hump until, say, you get an insurance payment back or some other type of financing, even your customers back, but they'll do bridge loans. Forgivable loans, I kind of like those. Communities look at those because they say, you know, a lot of times if companies get an insurance payment and then they leave, that doesn't really help the community. So these actually encourage people in 1 year's time, if you're still here operating, we're going to forgive 50% of the loan. 2 years, we forgive it all. So those are programs that I think are innovative. And then there's revolving loans where you just pay back the principal. So these are just tools, and you can research more, and we'll have more information on them. But I like the creativeness around some of these programs Canadian Red Cross, they did a grant program in Fort McMurray for businesses, and I love that program. United Way has programs. Rotary did a program in 2013 with Canmore floods, and just to help businesses, because the thing with businesses is oftentimes governments and charities cannot give money to corporations that are for profit. That's what we found with Red Cross. So we had to find a way around it as an emergency grant. So, they're more limited in the types of financing they can get. Community co-ops can be an asset in your community. Even banks that are things like credit unions, they can be a little more creative, ATB Financial, around the types of programs, banking that they do. Obviously, bankers do not want businesses to go out of business, so they're very open, especially right now. I think they're going to get really creative on helping your businesses because they want you to succeed. They need you to succeed just as much as you do. Other things, crowdsourcing, there's lots of different types of finances, but my point on this slide is to really just think about how can we get creative in helping our businesses survive, because honestly, this one's going to be a tough one. It's a global impact here, and so we got to get really creative on how to help businesses. Here's just a few resources that our organization has. The top left there, we run a course, and this is up to the US. We got the ability to train this course in Canada, and we've run it a number of times. We're actually internally looking at how we can offer that course remotely right now because of the situation, so stay tuned. We'll be communicating about that. The top other toolkit on the top right, that was updated in 2019. It's a community toolkit that was based on the US toolkit that we got out of the International Economic Development Council. It was updated last year, and we have that on our website. You can download it for free. I actually had a whole bunch of copies made, like hard copies, and we've just put that on our website. If you want to buy one, we will mail it to you for cost, basically the cost and shipping, if you want a hard copy. So that's available on our website. The other thing, the link on the bottom there, I mentioned the IEDC earlier, the International Economic Development Council. They have a portal called restoreyoureconomy.org. Just because the US has so many disasters, they just have a lot of resources on their site as well. So if you're a business, if you're an economic developer, local official, go onto their website and dig around, because I know they've got a lot of resources. And when I was starting this in 2013, that's where I went, and they continue to update that. I am going to try and have them as a guest in the future. So Michelle, if you're able to, I'll stop sharing my screen if you want to speak on wherever you are.
Yep.
Oh, good. I'll mute myself. And so this is Michelle Evans. She's our ADM, so our Assistant Deputy Minister for Tourism and Economic Development for the Government of Alberta. So welcome, Michelle.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Leanne, for arranging this. And again, I'm glad that we have an opportunity to connect with so many people in a very unique forum here. And so again, appreciate you giving us the chance to spend just a few minutes with you today. Again, I know you are all getting, as Leanne said, information from a variety of sources. And so one of the things that I just wanted to make sure that we were emphasizing is that you were aware of some of the Government of Alberta sources of information that you can reach out to at this point in time, and where you can continue to look in the coming days as the situation evolves for more information. So as many of you know, the emergency that is obviously all on top of our minds is the COVID-19 outbreak, and it was declared a pandemic by the the World Health Organization. And yesterday, the province declared a provincial public health emergency. And so what that does is it enables incremental powers and tools for the public health officers to allow for a more streamlined response and those sorts of things. So what I would encourage everyone to do, if you haven't been following the Chief Medical Officer of Health, she is providing a daily update through the internet. You can watch her online. If you go on to alberta.ca, you can get those daily updates that she is providing, sort of the facts, the information that you need about what's changing in the situation in the province on a daily basis. Those are occurring around 4:30 our time on a daily basis. And that's where you can go to get a lot of the information that you need about the latest number of cases, where the cases are spreading, what some of the more recent measures and other components are. As of yesterday's update, we had 97 cases in Alberta confirmed. Those are throughout the entire province in all regions of the province. So I just want to again highlight that this is not just isolated to our larger centers, it is spreading through the province. Again, the focus at this point, we haven't activated our emergency response team, and what that means is there is an emergency response center and a coordinated effort across all of government to feed in information, to feed in issues, to get answers to questions, to provide common information. Again, the best source of sort of what's publicly available and most current is on the Government of Alberta website, www.alberta.ca/COVID. And if you haven't found that site, there's just a tremendous amount of resource there for you, for people. So at this point, the focus for us has been on containing the spread of the virus and starting to think about planning. So you saw the school closures. You're aware of, I suspect, the need for self-isolation or social distancing. Again, allowing distance to try to minimize the spread of the virus. And that's really important as we proceed through this particular emergency response, is try to slow and limit the spread of the virus to have fewer people getting sick. And that helps limit the strain and on our health system and resources. Again, if one of the first things we're doing right now is trying to communicate for everyone that's coming back to the province from a variety of places around the world, that if you are returning from international travel, you do need to self-isolate for 14 days. And that again allows us to protect and limit the spread. A couple of things that government has already enacted. They've put in an additional $500 million, made it available for the health system, again, to respond to the emergency situation. Yesterday, Premier announced an additional $60 million for vulnerable Albertans going to a number of municipalities and social programming services to help deal with very vulnerable Albertans, homeless and seniors, to try to help them deal with some of the challenges that are resulting from this. As well, some incremental limits in terms of trying to minimize the spread. So we've asked that all events over 50 people are canceled. They've shut down the rec centers, casinos, bingo halls, theaters, and other facilities. Our ski hills and other parks are being closed as well. Again, sit-down restaurants can continue to operate, but they've asked them to operate at lower capacities, again, trying to continue to restrain some of those spreads and otherwise. At this point, again, I just point out a few resources for businesses. We've been very focused on dealing at least with the initial response. So on the website, you will find some resources for employers and employees to help understand some of the requirements or needs that you may have around the 14-day self-isolation. There is a 14-day job protected leave that has been put in without a sick note. There's a little bit of information and some pamphlets that you might use if you are a business, or that your businesses might want to use in terms of when you're staying open, some things that you can do to keep your businesses protected and keep your employees and otherwise protected. So there's some information there as well. Again, and you will see some further supports and announcements over the coming days. We're currently trying to understand and assess what's happening throughout the system. We're having regular calls with the supply chain from a food and logistics perspective. We have been assured from the logistics and food suppliers that what we're seeing is a demand challenge, not a supply challenge. That what's happening is there's a lot of panic buying and hoarding that's occurring. That is something that's not necessary. What we're encouraging is that you have reasonable amounts of food and those sorts of things at home. The supply is available, but the challenge is keeping up with the demand that is a little bit abnormal for those retailers. So again, we're continuing to monitor that and make sure that is what's continuing to happen. But just want to give you that assurance that those conversations are happening on a regular basis as well. A couple of other things that government's already enacted. We've extended driver's licenses and vehicle registrations until May 15th. So again, if you're in that renewal period and having some challenges getting those renewals done, there's a bit of an extension there. Again, there's just a number of different services and things that government's looking at. And I expect that over the coming days, you will see some incremental announcements coming from government in terms of immediate economic responses. I don't have anything to share with you at this moment, but again, just sharing you to go back to that Alberta alberta.ca website. And as we have more of these conversations, I'll be in a position to share a little bit more about what government's doing to support businesses directly. But again, at this point, it's about getting information out to people, factual, accurate information, so that you have those pieces, gathering questions and other things that you may have through our various sources, and again, staying in close connections with our variety of partners. So Justin and I have been contacting each other on a very regular basis, even more so than usual, and we're going to continue to have those kinds of conversations. We're in conversations with our tourism partners, we're in conversations with our economic development partners from across Canada as well. So I just want to give you that assurance. We're here, we're listening, we're trying to understand and gather that information, and we're developing a response plan from the provincial government's perspective that will continue to roll out over the coming days. So Leanne, I think I'll stop there and turn it back to you. And there's a lot of information that I've just downloaded, but again, a lot of information on our website, alberta.ca/COVID.
Thanks, Michelle, and we'll make sure and put those links on our website to make sure if you're in Alberta. If you're not, I am sure the province of Ontario and Saskatchewan are doing the same, so I encourage you to find their information portal. And I know, Michelle, you guys are working hard, and nobody foresaw this scope and magnitude, so to be able to respond quickly is tough, and so kudos to you guys. So I want to turn it over to Justin now. Justin is the ADM for, now did you change the department name? Because I saw Western Economic Development. Is it development now?
It's diversification.
Oh, okay. I saw it on your website.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nope. Western Economic Diversification.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. Thanks very much, Leanne. Real pleasure to be with you here today to share some of the things that are going on within the government of Canada. Pleased to present with Leanne and with Michelle today. And kudos to you, Leanne, for pulling this all together in short order. I think it's very timely. We're going to be reaching out to a number of stakeholders over the course of the next couple of weeks to get a better understanding of what's happening on the ground and what we can be doing in the immediate term, but also in the longer term. And your points around focusing on recovery is really important, Leanne, and something I think our department's going to be more heavily involved with into the future as well. But there's a number of information items I want to share with you today. As Michelle shared with you, a significant amount of information. Unfortunately, we haven't had time to put slides and other things together, so this is all coming real time. There were some big announcements made today. I'm going to go over some of those with you, so you may want to take notes on some of this stuff. So obviously, the health and safety of Canadians is our #1 priority, and we're focusing on the virus in terms of what it's in terms of a global economic impact, but the real consequences that it's having for Canadians and Albertans. And on top of this, we're hit in Alberta with a double whammy. We have the plummeting oil prices. I saw price hit $25 today. So this is a challenge. And due to recent events, this is really impacting our energy sector and going to have a huge challenge for our province in terms of severe economic distress. And we're very, very aware of that. But we all know that we have a history of coming together to confront big and serious challenges in this province. We've proven it many times before. And we want to work through this together. So here are some of the things that the government of Canada is doing in order to mitigate the impact of this virus. Just this morning, the Prime Minister announced a significant $27 billion package in direct support to Canadian workers and businesses, plus $55 million to meet the liquidity needs of businesses and households through tax deferrals. Combined, this represents 3% of Canada's GDP, so it's huge. Administered by CRA, our revenue agency, an emergency care benefit is going to be providing $900 biweekly for up to 15 weeks to workers who must stay at home and don't have access to paid sick leave. So this is a significant issue for a number of part-time and other types of workers, and the government is stepping in to address this with this particular fund. Workers, including the self-employed who are sick, quarantined, or have been directed to self-isolate but do not qualify for EI benefits, are eligible. Workers who are taking care of a family member who is sick with COVID-19 but do not qualify for EI. EI eligible and non-EI eligible working parents who have to stay home without pay because of their children who are sick or in need of care because of school closures. And I know that's impacting a number of Canadians. This benefit will be available in April 2020 via the CRA My Account Secure portal. So you can call a toll-free number equipped with automated application processes. So I think at this point, it's important to know that that the benefit is coming. It's not going to be immediate. It's going to take a month to get through the system, but be aware that it is coming and the details are being worked out as we speak. So for Canadians who lost their job or faced reduced hours as a result of COVID impact, there's an emergency support benefit developed by CRA to provide up to $5 billion in support to workers who are not eligible for EI and who are facing unemployment. Implementing the EI work sharing program, which provides EI benefits to workers who agree to reduce their normal working hours as a result of developments beyond their control or their employers, and by extending that eligibility of such agreements to 76 weeks, which eases the eligibility requirements, and they're streamlining the application process. We're also providing assistance to families with children by temporarily boosting the Canada Child Benefit payments by $300 per child, and families will receive additional money as part of their May payment. Additional assistance to individual and families with low and modest incomes with special one-time top-up payments under the GST credit will be coming in early 2020. The average boost of this measure will be close to $400 for singles and close to $600 for couples, $400 for singles. So the proposed enhancements of these will give a single parent with 2 children and low to modest income nearly $1,500 in additional short-term support. We're also waiving the mandatory 1-week waiting period for EI sickness benefits for workers in imposed quarantine or who have been directed to self-isolate. And we're waiving the requirement for a medical certificate to access EI sickness benefits. Also, really important news is that we're extending the tax filing deadline for individuals to June 1st. And allowing all taxpayers to defer tax payments until after August 31st. Amounts that are due after today or before September, there will be no interest or penalties that accumulate on those amounts during this period. And those who expect to receive benefits on the GST are encouraged to not delay in filing to ensure those entitlements are there for the next fiscal year. As we go into businesses, we are going to be seeing an eligible small business a temporary 10% wage subsidy for the next 90 days, up to a maximum of $1,375 per employee, or $25,000 per employer. And this is going to support businesses that are facing revenue losses and help prevent some layoffs. Businesses will be able to benefit immediately from that support by reducing their remittances of income tax withheld on their employees' remuneration. Employers benefiting from this measure will include corporations eligible for the small business deductions, as well as nonprofit organizations and charities. We're also seeing that they'll be providing increased flexibility to lenders to defer mortgage payments on homeowner government insured mortgages, and implementing a 6-month interest-free moratorium on Canada student loan payments for all individuals in the process of repaying loans. In terms of Indigenous support, we're providing $300 million for new distinctions-based Indigenous community supports to address immediate needs in the First Nation communities. And in terms of small business support, we're also seeing flexibility added to the Canada account limit to allow government to provide additional support to Canadian businesses to deal with exceptional circumstances. For those of you who don't know, the Canada account is administered by the Export Development Corporation and is used by government to support experts when they deem them to be in the national interest. And this will allow government to provide additional support to Canadian companies through loans, guarantees, and insurance policies through these challenging times. We're also augmenting credit available to farmers and agri-food sector through the Farm Credit Canada. And the CRA will not be contacting any small businesses to initiate tax audits or assessments on GST for the next 4 weeks. For the vast majority of businesses, CRAs will temporarily suspend all its audit interaction with taxpayers and representatives. We're also launching an insured mortgage purchase program that will purchase up to $50 billion worth of insured mortgage pools through CMHC. So this builds on previous announcements. Prime Minister mentioned last week $1 billion in response to public health for provinces and territories to support workers in self-isolation, as well as the Business Credit Availability Program through BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, and Export Development Canada for a $10 billion credit to fund money to businesses, helping them continue their operations. Also good news came out today is that Canada's 6 largest banks have committed to supporting personal and small business customers and have announced up to 6-month payment deferral for mortgages and the opportunity to relieve for other credit products. I'm not sure we've ever seen that before, so that's significant. So obviously this is a highly evolving situation with a number of measures from the Government of Canada. The finance minister also mentioned today that EDC and BDC are developing a tailored set of tools for affected sectors, including air transportation and the oil and gas sector. And Government of Canada will begin working with the Government of Alberta on the oil and gas sector with a significant investment in orphan well remediation to help companies and workers in the province and get some people back to work in the remediation of those orphan wells. An announcement on that is coming in the days to come. In terms of WD, we're working very much as we have been as a trusted partner with SMEs in Western Canada. We're closely monitoring the situation. We're knee-deep into the middle of economic recovery planning right now, developing programs and tools to support various sectors. Our minister has a high level of interest in the tourism sector and other associated sectors that we're focused on. And so there's very specific activities we're engaged in right there. Here and now that you'll probably hear about in the next couple of weeks. We're paying close attention to the oil and gas situation as well and what sorts of supports we can provide through the energy supply chain as those impacts become very real over the next little while. We've also been working with our community futures organizations that we fund to provide them with additional flexibility on interest rates for clients, allowing them the option to provide interest rates of less than prime, and any decisions on interest rates of which clients to offer a flexibility will be taken with each individual CF. Those changes are in effect immediately for a period of at least 4 months. You may be aware we launched our business scale up and productivity program that supports high growth businesses that are scaling up. Those are no interest loans. We're still continuing with that program. A request for expressions of interest is now up, has been for a couple weeks, and we're accepting applications until March 23rd of next week. We're also looking at other projects we can do with economic development organizations, not-for-profits, to support businesses innovate, grow, and compete. So we need your ideas. We need your active engagement to tailor things specific to your region, to your sectors that you're focused on. And we'll be continuing to work closely with you as we have before. Michelle's group and our group fund the Business Link as well. They've set up some information for small businesses on COVID management. They have a website as well called businesslink.ca/COVID-19. You can search that up to point small businesses to for resources specifically for small businesses. So lots of information. Apologies for the dump of information. It's coming in real time. We'll have information on the web. A lot of news articles coming out today with a lot of the finance announcements today that you'll want to dig into. They are substantial, and we should make sure that businesses are aware that they are available for the taking at this point. So I'll leave it there at this point, Leanne, and happy to answer any questions with Michelle.
That's awesome. I'm just looking at the time here. We're at 8 minutes. I've got a couple questions on here. One specifically, Justin, around how can, someone said they've been trying all morning to figure out how to connect on these business supports. They need a phone number or some way for their small, medium businesses to learn if they qualify. Is that, I mean, I know it's coming in real time, but is that something that's already up there that you can share with everyone?
Yeah, why don't I, after this call, Leanne, get you a couple of links that you can send out to the participants. The problem is there's not one central portal because there's BDC, there's a CRA, there's a bunch of different things, and we're trying to make it easier to navigate, but give us a bit of time on that.
Well, you got an hour. How's that?
Hey, got an hour. And I would encourage you to call the Business Link too, would be one central point. Who should be up to speed on these things as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
Well, honestly, yeah, thank you. I mean, it's encouraging to see so much come out so quickly. I know it's never quick enough for most people, but yeah, you're doing the best you can, and these programs are going to be a great asset to businesses. The other thing I just wanted to say, so you mentioned EDC and BDC, so Export Development Canada and Business Development Canada. They're both are going to be guests on our next week's webinar. We've got Michael Selchis, he's the SVP for the Prairies, and then we've got Shannon Prius, Regional Manager. And Mark Livingston's going to join us with Export Development Canada, because they know they've got 2 programs. Obviously, they're kind of a conduit for the federal government in implementing some of these programs. So we want to hear from them on, you know, how far things have come, how your business community can take advantage of them. And if any of you are interested, I know we're running out of time. So I mean, I'll give you my email, Leanne, Leann, at edaalberta.ca. If you want to email any future topics that are burning in your community that you want information on, because like I said, I know tourism and events is a big thing for some communities, especially the fact you had to cancel a bunch of events, and what that means to your local business community. So we're going to try and do topical webinars that, you know, if it makes sense, you want to learn more about it that week, join in. If you don't have the time, we're going to try and make these available online that you can just download. So just as we close, I do want to sincerely thank Michelle and Justin for taking the time. I know your lives are pretty crazy right now, but I would anticipate that every single person on this line is pretty burnt out right now. And that is just the beginning. So thank you for taking the time. I truly hope at least you got some content that was valuable to you. We will send out a link shortly to everyone with any additional resources. And so this week, I just hope everyone stays safe and keeps the anxiety at a low. So thanks again. Take care.